We're making history. We're writing the books right now.
All right, guys, welcome back to our Meet Your Mayor podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Morley, and I'm here with our co-host, Austin Westfall, and the Mayor of Taft, Dave Noerr.
Hello,
Dave.
how's everybody today?
Thank you for joining us on this podcast, Dave. Last week, we spotlighted the town of Wasco. This week, we're going to take a look at Taft. First off, we want to ask you, how long have you been a mayor in the city of Taft, Dave?
Well, actually, I've been on the city council now for 16 years. And during the course of those 16 years, I have served as a council member, the mayor pro tem, and for 4 years as the mayor. And I will be on the council, it appears right now, for at least another 4 years.
And the way it rotates, like many other cities in Kern County, is you guys rotate. Is that correct?
That is correct. When you seat the new council, a portion of the new council every 2 years, then you reorganize the council and you put together the committees. And it is at that time that the council members select who will be the mayor and who will be the mayor pro tem.
And so you're the lucky guy who is happening to fall on the year 2020.
That is indeed the case.
Is that anything you ever expected to try to handle as the mayor? I mean, a whole pandemic?
Well, I don't think of the list of things that I figured I'd be dealing with, a global pandemic made the list.
COVID-19.
One of the things we really want to do with these podcasts also is get to know you as a person. You're the leader of this community, and we really want to show, who it is, how you came to be mayor. Can you tell us a little bit of just about you, your backstory?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I started working in construction very early on in my life, and then started working in the oil industry in Taft in January of 1981. Now, I was born to a military family, so I lived in many, many places in the United States as well as out of the continent of the United States prior to coming back, settling in California, and then coming to Bakersfield/Taft in 1981, going to work for the oil industry. And I'm a father and a grandfather, very proud of both of those things. And there were some issues taking place in the state of California some 16 years ago. And I was actually playing golf with a group of guys that I play golf with. And I said, guys, you know what we need in government? We need more people from business, from the private sector. We've got to balance the views. And then I talked for the course of the golf match about this. Finally, one of them had enough of me talking about it and said, enough. Throw your hat in the ring, shut up and putt. So that began what happened. I threw my hat in the ring. I was elected. And subsequent to that, I have never spent a nickel on a re-election. After my first 4 years working for the people, I simply told them, you know who I am, you know how I work, you know what I do. If you want me to keep working for you, vote for me. And as it were, I've been the lead vote getter in 3 subsequent elections without having spent a nickel on any of them.
Tell me about what's the difference between, because you've been on the council for a while, you know how the job works, been a council member, you've been mayor pro tem, now mayor. What's the difference between serving as a mayor or serving on the council in general during a normal year versus what it's been like in 2020?
Well, any normal year, you're going to deal with a lot of different issues in the business climate. I mean, after all, the oil industry is our main industry, and it's a commodities-based industry, and they go up and down. We have the highs and the lows, and we deal with those things. The impacts that they have on businesses that support the industry, as well as the financial impact to the community. But what is happening in 2020, and it's happening to our community just like everybody else's, every business is impacted. Every aspect of government is impacted. Schools are impacted. Churches are impacted. There is not a cross-section of life, including those that are so unfortunate they live on the street. So, vagrants and homelessness and all of the above. So there is not a cross-section of the populace that has not seen some negative impacts of this pandemic. And to have all those things happen at once, it's a first.
You started out as somebody who had, it sounds like, no political aspirations. You were a businessman. Is it tough to get votes? How do you go about making a name for yourself? How do you go about getting yourself elected in the first place?
Well, the beauty of living in the city of Taft, we're a small, tight-knit community, and people know who you are, of you, what you're about. If not, then you got to get out there. And I will tell you, the first time I ran, I did it. I did the signs, and I was on a candidate forum and answered the questions, was in the paper. For heaven's sakes, I even had a billboard. My kids thought, my goodness, Dad, what are you doing? My slogan wasn't vote for me. It was put Dave Noerr to work for you. And that's what I have done since. I've worked for the people. In 2008, we had a tough time. It was during the course of a recession. I was newly elected as a mayor, and I thought, I'm going to set an example and tell everybody we've got to continue to provide services to the taxpayers, but we got to do it with less. Well, I've got an idea. So I saved up 4 checks that I get once a month, as does the rest of the city council, a stipend. And at an open meeting, I told everybody, look, it's going to be a tough time for a while. And I tore those 4 checks up, and I said, as long as I represent the people, I'll do it for free. I get no money. I get no benefits. I get the benefit of having the pride of representing the people of the city of Taft. So since then, I'm the cheapest guy on the payroll. And maybe that's why they keep me around.
And I think that's something that's really been amazing to see as we started doing this, is especially in these smaller communities, you're so tight knit that when these really kind of devastating things that impact the whole world, you really band together. And with the pandemic, is that something that you've been seeing in Taft, is just the community coming together?
Well, it is indeed. As a matter of fact, that's a hallmark of living in the city of Taft. We're a small little piece of Americana. I mean, we salute the flag automatically, and we say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. We open doors for women and the elderly, and we just do those things. So in the case of the pandemic, we rely so much on each other and on your neighbors and people who aren't necessarily family, but we're an extended family over here. So help is not very far away. That's one of the great things about living within our city. In the west side, we consider not just proper city of Taft, but Ford City, South Taft, Taft Heights, the west side, as our community. And you're right, it's one of the great things about being in a small, tight-knit community.
And another characteristic of smaller communities, it seems, is that some of these communities have personalities. One of the biggest industries you think of when you think about the city of Taft is the oil and gas industry. It was announced sometime within the past month, it's very recent, that Governor Newsom is ordering the phase out of gas vehicles.
We're providing an abundance of new choices and new technology.
As the mayor of a town that relies so heavily on the oil and gas industry, what's your reaction when you hear about something like that?
Well, it's very interesting. I had the pleasure of visiting with Governor Newsom one-on-one for 15 minutes when he came out to McKittrick, California, to visit the site of a surface expression.
I saw progress in the right direction.
And just 15 minutes, the governor and we talked about his visit. And I asked him, what did you see? I know what I see, and I know what I've seen. I've got experience dealing with these things, and I've got 30 years in the oil fields next to the wellhead. And the governor, to his credit, I will tell you that he was ignorant about a great many aspects of oil and gas. Now, that's not an insult. Ignorance just means you haven't been exposed to the facts. And I spent a great deal of time thereafter providing him with facts that he just simply was not aware of. The role that hydrocarbons, oil and gas, and petrochemicals play in our lives continues to shape day by day. And so will we see the usage of hydrocarbons and petrochemicals change? Perhaps, but just very quickly to say, if we just have all battery-powered cars, we're going to get rid of all oil and gas. Well, let me tell you, that's so far from the truth. It's hard to discuss. Only 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil that comes into California goes straight into public transportation. To make a battery-powered vehicle by bulk, they are over 50% plastic, composites, petrochemicals, just to make the vehicle itself. And the miracle of petrochemicals and plastics is that only is about 15% of the weight of the vehicle. Hence, the ability of a battery-powered vehicle or a very small, very efficient motor to drive that vehicle down the road and it still be safe. And on a very basic level, let's just say hypothetically you did that and everybody had a battery powered car. I've had this discussion with a fellow. What are you going to drive on? Think about that for a second. We make highways and streets and roads out of two materials in the United States of America. I'm talking about 99.9999%. It's either made out of asphalt, which is a petroleum-based product that binds an aggregate together to create blacktop, or it's made out of concrete. Well, concrete is sand and gravel and cement. Cement is a mined ore that is then crushed, exposed to a very hot flame around 2,000 degrees, which either in the United States comes from natural gas or coal slurry. Both of these are hydrocarbons. So to say everybody's going to drive a battery powered car and will no longer need oil and gas is that's as big as fairy tale as Tinkerbell and Peter Pan. Whether it's the screen or the battery in your iPhone, your computer, your car, whatever the case may be. Case in point, in the state of California, as recently as 1990, only imported about 4.5% of their oil. The rest of it, they either produce right here under the most stringent environmental regulations in the world, or we imported it from Alaska, 4.7%. So we were that close to just using oil and gas out of the continental United States or our 50th state, 49th. But anyway, right now we're importing over 70% of the oil we use in the state of California. In the past 10 years, when we built these huge commercial sized solar plants and wind farms, and we've installed hundreds of thousands of solar roofs, and we've registered over 600,000 battery powered cars, California's oil usage has dropped 2%. If we want to really have an impact on climate change by the way we use hydrocarbons, we need to cut back on the oil that we import from Ecuador, from Colombia, from Iraq, and those other places that have terrible human rights violations and records, as well as almost a total disregard for the climate and the environment. The more oil that we produce right here under those stringent regulations, the less we support those who produce it elsewhere and have negative impacts on climate change. We will transition. So first and foremost, if you want to cut down on the amount of oil and gas you use in California, cut down on the amount of oil and gas that you bring into this country. Use what you have here.
And another big point of frustration that we've been reporting on over the past, it seems this has been going on for around a year or so at this point, maybe a bit longer, is the closure of Taft Prison. It's one of the largest employers in the city, and there's been a lot of news surrounding the future of it. Where does this issue stand as of middle of October 2020 as we record this?
Well, I'll tell you what, you're talking about what was the federal prison on the outskirts within the city of Taft that was closed. And it was closed during the course of the pandemic. And I spent a great deal of time with Congressman McCarthy, as well as the people that were running that facility. And it was a very interesting time because the DOJ said we're not going to move inmates because we don't want to expose them to COVID. And yet they felt compelled to empty that facility. And those inmates were scattered about. And some of them ended up getting sick with COVID. But the pandemic has changed everything. As it stands right now, there are plans, and there's actually some staff out there in place, and there are plans being made and drawings being made to repair the shortcomings of the buildings that were affected by settling, and then make plans for the facility's use once those repairs are effected. Its final use actually has not been nailed down at this point in time, but is there a future for that facility? At this point in time, the answer is yes. The pandemic obviously changes everybody's schedule. If you remember when we first encountered this, we all needed to shelter in place for 14 days, then perhaps 30. Well, that was back in March. So yes, that facility will be used again. It's an asset, a substantial asset owned by the people. It will be put back in place, but specifically how has not been determined as of today.
So are you hoping that it will still remain in a prison setting, or are you hoping to transition it for the facility to be used in some other way?
Well, it is a facility designed for and meant for some type of holding / incarceration. If this world was a wonderful place and nobody violated the law and nobody violated anybody else's civil rights, then we wouldn't need prisons anywhere. That would be just wonderful. That is not the fact. We are, as long as we are human beings, going to have to, at some point in time, take dangerous individuals out of circulation and keep them away and keep them from creating new victims. So it is designed for its purpose, and it will be reused for that purpose in some form.
And have you been in discussion with the employees who worked at that prison to see if they would possibly still then be used in the transition of the facility?
We worked very hard to try to help those people who lost those jobs. We worked through the government, like I say, all the way up to the last letter written in support of keeping that facility open and repairing it and doing those things simultaneously as opposed to just completely emptying it, was signed by both Congressman Kevin McCarthy and Dianne Feinstein. If you had to get on opposite sides of the aisle and find two polar opposites, there you have them. And yet they agreed that it made sense. It made sense for the people. It made sense for everybody. And yet that did not take place. So we will endeavor to help place anybody and everybody we can who was displaced by that. But because right now the timeline is unknown, those people had to support their families. They have to do something to put food on the table, and they are doing something elsewhere at this time. It will be the individual making the decision to apply for and take a job in whatever form those jobs come when the time comes.
So, looking ahead the next 4 years, no matter what capacity on the council you serve, what direction do we want to take the city? There's so many big things happening right now. Where do you see Taft in 4 years, or at least which direction would you like to take Taft in the next 4 years?
We as a community, we as a city council have been working very hard to try to diversify our economy, just as surely as Bakersfield and Kern County has. I mean, you think about Kern County, we're an energy county and we're an ag county. Those are our two biggest players. I was actually just in a meeting and we were looking at the secured property tax rolls, top 10 in Kern County. Those top 10 secured property tax payers pay about $204 million a year. That's just in secured property tax. You take away oil and gas from that mixture, that number drops from $204 million to $43 million. That's a reduction of 80%. You think that's easy for Kern County to deal with, or the city of Bakersfield, or the city of Taft? Obviously not. What we have to do is help people understand that we as an industry are helping, aiding, and look forward to this just transition, but it's not just to get away from oil and gas, because the reality is when you look at green energy is very dependent on hydrocarbons, because mostly it's made up of mined ores from around the world, and to mine them and process them and to create these things is hydrocarbon dependent. So these things won't go away. We have got to help people understand the realities. And we will be producing and utilizing oil and gas and petrochemicals in the United States, in the state of California, long after you are as old as I am. We will also continue to look for opportunities to diversify our economy as far as bringing in some type of manufacturing. And if tomorrow, the wonderful scientists that work in the oil and gas industry came up with a way to use a barrel of oil to do nothing but create economical hairspray and solve the problem of cancer and no longer use it for oil and diesel, well, guess what? If it was worth a lot more money using it in those other places, that's where it would be used.
What's the hardest thing you've seen come out of the pandemic this past year? And also, what's maybe one of the brighter things that you've seen come out of the pandemic this last year?
But I can tell you one thing that has suffered, and this is very different than anything in the past, and that is the fact that we closed down the healthy population. We shut down the economy. People in small businesses, mom and pop businesses, people who have dedicated their lives to create this small business and use it to put food on the table, single moms that are doing hair, doing nails, providing for their family, that never wanted to be unemployment and things like that and government assistance, have been forced to stay at home. The stay-at-home order has actually driven part of the economy underground. It's driven it underground. So they're having to do something to put food on the table, but they're not on the tax rolls. And that's a byproduct of the pandemic and the result of the way that we're reacting to the pandemic. And another, so I am trying, as I talk to you about the negative aspects of COVID, to find some silver lining in it. And I've got to tell you, it's very, very difficult. Perhaps we will emerge from this and we will have a greater appreciation for the liberties that we lost prior to this. Young people were born, you were born in the United States, and you have lived a life of freedom. The government didn't tell you how to dress, put a mask on. They didn't tell you how many of you could get together, less than 10, less than 25. They didn't tell you if you could go to church, and when you're in church, if you could sing and celebrate your religion. That's happening right now. I hope all of us, everybody, gains a more sincere appreciation for what freedom truly is and what people have fought and died for to create this wonderful thing called the United States of America, and what the permanent loss of this would be. I refuse to call this the new normal. I'm so old, I've lived 59 years as a free American, and I will not call this the new normal. This is very abnormal, and I don't want you to live the rest of your life under these same conditions.
You know, you speak with such enthusiasm about, you know, serving your people and serving your community. I mean, can you speak a little bit more just about your feelings for Taft and the people that you serve and how they inspire you to keep doing the tough jobs, making the hard decisions, fighting for them, even if you're fighting against, you know, state, federal leaders?
Well, you know what? I think that's why they have me here still, because I will do that. Don't shy away from a fight. I don't choose to have to fight. I would rather work together, because together we accomplish so much more than if we're in the midst of combat. But the people of City of Taft, like I say, it's a chunk of America, Americana, if you will. And the frustration of being in a two-dimensional world. I mean, were it not for the pandemic, the three of us right now would be sitting in a room somewhere and we would look at one another. We'd be three-dimensional. Right now, this is a two-dimensional world. I mean, you might as well be Pac-Man.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us on the Meet Your Mayor podcast. It was a pleasure speaking with you. For anybody that wants to perhaps get involved with the City of Taft's city council meetings, where can they go to find information about how they can get involved in the process, or maybe just keep up with you?
You know, the wonderful thing about local government is access to local government. I answer as many questions at the local deli or the local hardware store as I do sitting on the dais, perhaps much more. And the beauty of our community is access to government. I mean, a phone call, a knock on the door. So right now, unfortunately, because of COVID, we cannot fill our chambers with the community, which we truly enjoy doing, but through our YouTube channel or come to City Hall, drop off a question, anything. But the older generation, unfortunately, we haven't done a great job about setting you up financially. We have spent money that your children will not earn. So for you young people, get involved in government. This is your future, your kids' future, your grandchildren's future. Be a part of government, because, like I say, I'm an older guy. I don't have that much more. I'll be around for a while because I want to enjoy my grandkids, but this is your future. This is your country. This is your government. You need to get involved.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. I hope you all stay healthy and have a wonderful day.
Mayor Noerr, you're a great guest. Appreciate your time.
Thank you now.
All right, guys. So that was our podcast interview with the Mayor of Taft, Dave Noerr. Thank you guys for joining us and listening in. And if you guys want to hear our other podcasts, you can catch them all on our website, turn23.com.